This morning's webinar will be presented by Chuck Marshall. Chuck is one of the consultants here at Superior Consulting Services on the data and analytics side. He has a wealth of experience in all aspects of data, from the integration side of things to data modeling and reporting and presenting data as well. So we're excited to allow Chuck to share some of his experiences with you this morning. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. So my name is Brian Larson. I am one of the partners here at Superior Consulting Services. A little bit about Superior, if you're not familiar with us. We are a consulting firm specializing in Microsoft data and analytics solutions. We have been in that business since 1997, so over 27 years, partnering with a number of different organizations in all aspects of business, nonprofit, both private and public sector. We do, again, work with all of the Microsoft data and analytics tools, especially Power BI, as well as SQL Server, both on premises and in the Azure environment. We do work with AI and machine learning and predictive analytics. We also offer custom training and mentoring, especially in Power BI and the analytics environments. So if you're looking for any type of training, help getting started with Power BI, educating your users for getting the most out of Power BI, we are excited, as always, to offer that. We work toward creating aha moments, and that comes from our values of ACE, heart, and ally. We work as an ACE to be the expert in the areas where we consult. We show heart by bringing lots of passion with what we do. Chuck was told by his test audience last night, being his wife, that he brings a lot of passion to what he talks about. So Chuck is certainly exemplifying that value. And then our last value of ally, we work as a partner, both with our clients and also with each other as we create solutions for our clients. So with that, I will turn things over to Chuck, and he can guide you through data cleansing as part of a data integration solution.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Brian, for that kind introduction. And we'll proceed forward. Just looking at the agenda for today. First, we'll talk about what data cleansing for analytics is, why it is important, go through a brief case study on what the impact of bad data can be. And then we'll talk about some of the common types of data quality issues requiring cleansing. And I'll review some of the tools that are out there for data cleansing. And then I'll talk about the process of data cleansing and make a couple of sort of final comments in that regard. And then we'll go through a demonstration of the process, starting with profile, and then actually do a couple of cleansing exercises. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So please submit any questions that you have in the questions feature in Teams, and Brian will curate those and we'll cover those during the Q&A period. Okay, so what is data cleansing for analytics? Really, what it amounts to, it's the fixing or removing of incorrect data from a data set prior to loading it into the analytics environment or data warehouse or whatever you want to call it. But the point is that the data is incorrect at its source. And And cleansing is only one type of data transformation that can happen to data as it's brought from its source and into the data warehouse. Another type of transformation is, what is referred to either as an enhancement or an enrichment. And there is sometimes a fine line between data cleansing and data enhancement. And actually, one of our use cases that I'll demonstrate, it starts to approach that fine line. So kind of to describe the difference between a cleansing scenario and what an enhancement scenario is, an example of a cleansing scenario would be an order is entered into a transaction system. Let's say this is for a manufacturing or for a retailer, an online retailer, where an order is entered with a requested date that is actually earlier than the order date. Essentially, imagine you were online with Amazon or someone else and were able to request something by a particular date, and you requested it for yesterday. Well, that doesn't really, obviously not possible to deliver something yesterday. So it's allowed by the application, but it's against business practice rules. So what the data cleansing process might do is to actually, as the data is loaded from its source into the target data warehouse, it would change that request date to actually match the order date, because it's not possible to ship something the day before yesterday, essentially. That's a cleansing scenario. Now, an enhancement scenario is different from that. For instance, say that same company would like to track its on-time shipping performance. How well do we do at shipping to our customers on time? So the data elements, which are essentially the date that something's promised, or the promised date, and the ship date, are available in the transaction system to support that measurement, but they're not easy for casual users to leverage. You can't ask a casual user to go out and say, well, for each order line, I'd like to assess whether the promised date was or the ship date was before or on the promised date. It's just too much to ask for your casual user. So what we do to enhance that data is we create some elements that essentially count every order in the system, and then we also count each order that's shipped on time. And we add those two pieces of data to the data warehouse, and we calculate them before the data is loaded. And then those two elements can be used by the analytic tool, whether it's Power BI or Excel or something else, to actually calculate that on-time shipping percentage in a easy to use fashion for our users. So the data, there's nothing wrong with the data. We're just enhancing it to allow users to assess what the on-time shipping performance is. So that's that kind of the difference between two transformations, a cleansing and an enhancement. So why do we need a data cleansing? And some of this might seem obvious, but the reason we need data cleansings in the analytics world is so that the analytics accurately represent the state of the enterprise, and they need to accurately reflect reality. Data that isn't clean will not be trusted by users, and trust in data, once lost, is difficult to regain. Oftentimes when we're putting in new analytics systems, there may be some resistance in the business to begin with to using a new analytics tool. If people can't trust the data, they're just not going to use it. And so an analytics system that's not trusted will not be adopted by the users and is of diminished value to the enterprise, and really begs the question of what the value of the analytics are that we're putting together. So that's why we need data cleansing. So a case study on the impact of bad data is imagine that you're the executive vice president of sales at a consumer goods company that sells through retail outlets. It's early Tuesday morning of the final week of a fiscal quarter, and you have an aggressive sales target to meet by quarter end. You were having meetings with the sales management team each morning at 7 o'clock to plan activities and to track progress. Every day of the final week, you're on the phone with your sales managers, finding out where you're at and what they need to do and what their plans are to make that goal by the end of the week. So on Monday, at a high level, your sales dashboard looks like this, which kind of shows, the graph on the right shows essentially the sales by month, and a target line. So we're in the last week of September, and we've got about $10 million of sales we need to achieve by the end of the week to make the monthly goal. But not only that, in order to make the quarterly goal, we need to make up for lost time that was in July and August, and even to surpass the overall yearly goal. There were some months earlier where we missed our targets as well. So we've got an aggressive goal for the end of the week, and as you can see, the cumulative sales numbers on the right. The actual is tracking, significantly below the target. So we got some work to do. So this is what it looks like on Monday. On Tuesday, the vice president comes in, 15 minutes before a 7 o'clock meeting, opens up his dashboard, and he sees this. And what we're seeing here is essentially yesterday our sales for September were at 20 million, and today they're at roughly 55 million. What that would mean is that in one day, overnight on Monday, my team sold $35 million worth of product, which exceeds our biggest total of the entire year in the month of May. It means we essentially had our biggest month's worth of sales in one day. What this is, what's the likely impact of this data, in this dashboard, in this situation? And this is a picture of a stressed sales executive. Now, I only use this picture, which was a stock online photo, because I couldn't bring in the picture of the first executive sales vice president that I worked with in my career, who was 6'7", 250 pounds, silver hair, deep booming voice, and anger management issues. But as this person, as the executive vice president comes in the morning and sees this dashboard, his or her mind would probably shift from, well, where are we at and what do we need to do, to, is this right? It doesn't look right. So the potential impacts of this are essentially, the EVP of sales suspects there's a problem with sales orders from the previous day, and he really can't see the overall progress of the team. So now, instead of planning our activities and working with the sales managers, the first thing he needs to do is figure out, okay, is this correct? And if it's not correct, what do we need to do to correct the situation? And that might be manually. So he's going to get on the phone. Trust me, he's going to get on the phone. He's not going to call you. He's going to call your boss or your boss's boss and say, hey, what's wrong with this data? So in the meantime, that, his time or her time could have been used more productively, particularly in the last few days of the quarter. So it's likely that trust in data and dashboards in general will likely be eroded to some degree. And if that's repeated over time, that trust continues to erode. And for every step in the direction of eroding trust, it takes probably 10 times the amount of effort to get that person back to their original trust level. So that's really the impact of bad data. So, what are the commonly used data cleansing tools that are out there? Well, Superior focuses or is primarily or almost exclusively operates in the Microsoft environment. And Microsoft has 3 explicit tools for data cleansing, and really another one I would say that we use in cleansing that kind of sits there in the background. But there's SQL Server Integration Services, which is, for lack of a better term, sort of the legacy on-premises tool for doing extraction, transformation, and loading of data, including cleansing. There is Data Factory, which is the Azure or the cloud tool, which is either Azure or Microsoft Fabric these days. And then there's Power Query, which is both used by Data Factory, but it's also used by Power BI and by Excel. And it offers data profiling and cleansing tools as well. The other tool that's sitting in kind of in the background is essentially SQL Server Management Services, or SSMS, which is where you can write queries and query the data and so forth. And write programs and stored procedures that also are part of the process. But some of the other non-Microsoft tools that are out there to do data cleansing and ETL are SAP Business Objects Data Services, Informatica, which their original tool was Power Center, but they've got all kinds of tools and upgrades that do both data cleansing, ETL, and data governance and so forth. Oracle has their suite of tools, their cleansing and ETL tools called Data Integrator. And there are some newer tools out there, Talend and Apache NiFi Airflow are two of those. And there are many, many other tools out there for data cleansing, but these are more or less the industry leaders at this time. So what is the process for cleansing data? So at a high level, what we want to do to sort of get started with data cleansing, and this applies to, first of all, when you're when you're getting a new data set in, you're bringing in some new data from either from a new system or a new part of a system that your organization operates, or you're getting some new demographic data from an external source. The first thing you want to do as part of data cleansing is profile the data. That is basically you look at it and analyze it. And based on that profiling, you'll determine what the validation rules are. What do I need to do to this data to clean it up so that it's useful for our analytics? Once those data validation rules are established, then you'll take those and you will program those rules into the ETL process using the tools that we just discussed. And then finally, at the end, you need to capture and report data quality issues, because as I'll get into a little later here, the best place to fix problem data or data quality issues is at the source. And as we are data professionals in the analytics space, we have to report back to either the business or the team, the IT team responsible for the applications, or frankly both, so that they understand the issues that are with the source data and they can take actions to actually fix that data at the source. Now, this data cleansing process that I've described really applies to like new data sets that are coming into the analytics environment. Really, data cleansing also happens on an ad hoc basis, and it's very, very much an iterative process where oftentimes the data cleansing process is someone who's using your analytics data will come to you and say, there's something strange about this piece of data, and you'll look into it and you'll say, aha, yeah, there's a problem with the data at its source. We need to go back and essentially, we don't need to. The investigation of what the problem is in that ad hoc case really is the profiling. But once you determine, that there is this problem, you go back and you determine what the validation rule is, you program it again, and then you capture and report those data quality issues. So the cleansing process can be sort of at a whole data set issue, or it can be driven by ad hoc instances of data quality problems as they come up. So data profiling. So the purpose of data profiling, basically looking at the data, is to gain a better understanding of the data and what it means. And then for our purposes, it's to find errors that are in the data, common problems with it, so that you can understand what the validation rules you might want to put into place. Now, Microsoft Power Query, which is a part of Excel, Power BI, and Data Factory, is an excellent tool for data profiling with one caveat. That caveat being it produces really, really, really useful. In my long career, when I first looked at what you can do for data profiling in Power Query. It really is quite transformational. The only problem is you actually can't save it out to without doing a print screen. So in its current version, you can't save that data and refer back to it. That's the only real issue I would have with using Power Query as a data profiling tool, but it's really excellent. So the next step here is defining the validation rules. So for each issue found by profiling the data, a validation rule should be considered. And you're asking a number of questions, but primarily you're asking three things. Should we load the record that is problematic, the individual item? And if you are loading it, should you alter it? We can look at data, understand there's a problem with it, and still load it as is. Or we can say, you know what, we're going to load that record, but we're going to make a change because we've worked with the business and they expect us to make this change. We've decided that's what we're going to do. And then thirdly, the not to be an afterthought in any way, shape, or form is who needs to be notified that there is, first of all, that there's a data quality issue. And secondly, if we made an alteration, if we actually altered data, who needs to be notified that we actually altered that data? So, and then finally, the business ultimately decides what the validation rules should be. So typically, it can be a business analyst within your IT team, within data analytics, who does the profiling of the data, finds what the issues are. But that person does not make the decision on what the rules should be. They may come up with a framework and proposed rules, but they really need to sit down with the people in the business that are responsible for that data and come up with a solution that the business actually ultimately makes the final decision on what those rules should be. So thirdly, we need to, once we've established what those validation rules are and they're approved by the business, we need to go in and code or configure the validation rules in the ETL tool. And that is the potential changes to or removal of records and the capture of the records that are changed, removed, or suspicious. And then we develop the reports to communicate those data issues to data stewards and other stakeholders. So, other data cleansing considerations. Ideally, data cleansing is part of a larger data governance program, whereby people across the organization work together to create guidelines for managing, protecting, and using data. And really what that represents is when I talked in the previous slide about the business making the decision on what the validation rules should be. Ideally, what I'm saying by the business, when I say that, is there is a data governance team that works together and sits down and meets on a regular basis and decides what we're going to, amongst other things, what the definitions are of different pieces of data, but they also determine, okay, we've got these data quality issues. It's that governance team that we would like to work with to establish what those validation rules are. Now, normally, I would say an organization having a data governance program and a data governance team that works together, that's more the exception than the rule. Most organizations, particularly the smaller organizations, are not going to have a data governance program. Doesn't mean you can ignore the business, but when there is a data governance program, that business systems analyst will work within that program to handle these data quality issues on a more formal basis, which generally results in better results. But if there isn't a data governance program, you're really going to be conducting ad hoc data governance by sitting down with the business and making those decisions. And then secondly, the best place to correct problematic data is at its source. And that's why it's important to capture and report bad data, so the root cause can be addressed upstream in the future. And by upstream, there are two things that can be done. You can work with the team that's responsible for that data. Say you have an order entry team or a customer service team that takes orders off the phone or something like that. Well, you can work with that team so that the business processes are improved, so that incorrect data is not being entered into the system. But you can also work with the business, and then work with the application team, so that the application team is either configuring or programming those kinds of validation rules in the application itself, so you don't end up with the problems in the source data to begin with. One thing that's never going to happen, as much as you would like it to as an analytics professional, is you're never going to be allowed to update the data in the source system. I've never been in an organization where the applications team said to the analytics team, sure, go ahead and update our data. That's just never going to happen. So you need to work with them so that they make the changes upstream. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is a demonstration. And we're going to start with data profiling. Okay, so you should be seeing a Power BI window. And Power BI is generally a tool I would use to create reports or dashboards. It's an excellent tool for that. But because I love the profiling within Power BI, it took me about a year after I started using Power BI to notice how cool the profiling options were within it. I'm going to pretend like I'm creating a new report. So what comes up here is it's asking you to add data to your report. I'm going to go out and find our sample data. So we have the data in Microsoft Fabric already. In its raw form, we brought it in from another database. It represents just two very simple pieces of information from a fictitious company. I need to connect to the SQL endpoint. That's not the default.
Maybe talk a little bit about with the warehouse in Fabric. What is the SQL endpoint? Why does that matter?
So that the SQL endpoint is essentially when you've loaded something into the data warehouse, you can look at it. The SQL endpoint is essentially what most people are used to when they look at a database. It presents a series of tables.
Yeah.
So the two pieces of information we have here, well, first of all, there are a lot of system tables, but down at the bottom here, I've created two schemas within the warehouse, one for clean data and one for staging data. So we are going to look at, we just have customer information and we have sales information for this. This is raw data from this fictitious company. So I've selected those two tables and I now click on transform data. And it's going to ask if we want to import the data or do direct query. We want to import the data where it will be visible to us within Power BI. Okay, so you notice over here on the right, we have customer and sales data. We're going to start looking at the customer data. So you can see there are a series of columns that we're looking at here. That's basically the entirety of the data. So for customer, we've got an ID, a name, a city, a state, and a zip code, and a customer type. And when we click on any of the individual columns, it's going to give us some more information about those in a graph in a graph and some column statistics. Now you'll see here that it's showing a count of 1,000 records, and they're distinct and unique, which you would expect from an ID perspective. But I know that we have more than 1,000 customers, and by default, Power BI or really Power Query brings in the top 1,000 rows. I want to recommend that you never accept 1,000 rows for proper data profiling. And the reason for that is I'm going to go over here. We're all from Minnesota for the most part, and I'm going to click on city. And what you'll see here at the bottom is we've got, once again, 1,000 customers listed here. But it looks like most of our customers are in Minnetonka based on this. And that just is, Minnetonka is a large suburb, but it is not as large as Minneapolis or St. Paul. So what you want to do is go down to the bottom. It's real easy to change and change your profiling to be based on the entire data set. It's now going to go out, and because there are only 20,000, this comes back very quickly. The reason that it profiles the top 1,000, as you can imagine, if you've got a 3 million record table for sales or financial transactions, it's going to take a while for it to come back. But now it comes back, and we've actually got a real listing of who are most common, what the most common cities are for our customers. And this is where we were going to go in the end anyway to identify a couple of our data quality. One I would definitely call an analytics issue, and the other I would consider is less an issue, but still something that we want to do. There are two things here that are problematic. If you look at our second, third, and fifth most common cities for our customers, they are St. Paul spelled with a period, St. Paul spelled without a period, and St. Paul spelled out SAINT. Well, fairly obviously, those three are actually the same city, and we've got it being captured in the system three different ways. Now, if you were going to be doing an analysis of sales by city, you can see how this would be problematic in its current form. So what we need to do in this case is we need to convert to a common spelling of St. Paul. So what I've done in the background I'll show you is I've created a translation table that will take particular spellings of the city and will translate them into a common spelling, and I'll show you that a little further down the road. But we need to consolidate the St. Paul's. And then secondly, you'll notice that all of the cities are spelled in uppercase. This is where what I talked about as a fine line between being an error and being an enhancement. In theory, well, in practicality, a lot of people operationally, say your people working in a warehouse, aren't going to care whether the shipping label or the reports are in uppercase or lowercase. It's not an operational or a transactional issue for the system to be using uppercase. But in the case of analytics, studies have shown that using actually proper case, where the first letter in city names is capitalized and the rest are lowercase, actually is better for comprehension than using all uppercase. So our two validation rules that come out of just this look here are: we need to consolidate the St. Paul's, and we need to convert the city name to proper case. All right, now we're going to switch over to the sales quickly and look at this. I'm not going to go through all the IDs or other things. I'm just going to go over to our sale price column and look at it. I'm interested in capturing potential data entry errors here. So once again, it's starting with the top 1,000. I'm going to go to the entire data set. It'll come back. The other thing you'll notice here is our value distribution isn't sorted in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of, it's a bit odd here. And one of the reasons for that is that the data in the staging database is actually stored as text. So what we're going to do is convert that right here to a decimal number, and that'll change our profiling considerably on sale price. So here we get what is actually going on here. And it shows you the count of the records, but it shows you what the average is, and it shows you the standard deviation as well. I'm not going to go into the statistics of standard deviation, but it kind of tracks the variability. I know, though, that this company sells both products and services, so I'm not 100% sure that this profiling is quite sufficient here. So I'm going to quickly go over to the database itself, and I've got a little query here that's going to capture that same information by service and then by product. And I'm going to quickly run a query. And it shows that the average for service, the average is about $120, and the standard deviation is about 120 as well. So that's how services look. And then when I run that same thing for products, the average price for a product is actually lower than the service, but that standard deviation is much higher. And what we're looking at here is, imagine you're a furniture store. You sell furniture, but you also sell furniture polish. And you sell a lot of furniture polish, a high volume of that, but you don't sell a high volume of dining room tables. And that's the issue that we have here. We want to treat products different than services. We want the threshold for what is considered to be an error for product sales to be different than what it is for service. So I've done a determination. I think that we should exclude services that are over $1,000, but we shouldn't exclude products until they're over essentially what I'm saying is $5,000. So that's our validation rule. It's to drop records out and report on them for services that are over 1,000 and products that are over 5,000. So that's what we've learned there. So now, in order to implement those rules, we're going to go into Fabric, because we're going to implement them in two different ways as well. So in order to fix the issues that we had with customer, changing to proper case and consolidating the St. Paul's, we're going to create a new data flow. And we're going to call this data flow staging customer to clean customer. And we've got a couple of these already, so we're going to call this one number 3. And we're going to go ahead and create that. Okay, so this screen you're actually seeing here looks a little bit similar to what we were looking at in Power BI itself. That's because it really is Power Query. This is just the Fabric version of it. So we have to go out and get our data. And once again, we're going to look for Fabric, and we're going to use a warehouse. Now this time I don't have to choose the SQL endpoint. That's kind of sort of assumed in this particular case. And we're now connecting to it. All right, we're getting the message that it's taking longer than expected, so I'm going to go ahead and click on well, it's not allowing me to cancel. All right, we're going to close out of this window of Fabric. We've got another one open. We're going to create another window, and we're going to just call this guy. Probably created number 3 there already. Actually, it did. I'm going to go down here and try to leverage this to see if it can be used. Okay. All right, it really can't, so we're going to get out of this one and create a new one. And we're just going to call this clean customer. Okay, we're going to go through the same process. Okay. in my workspace. Okay, so this is also should look similar to what you saw before when I was in Power BI. In this case, however, we're only working on the customer. We're not working on the sales yet. And we're going to bring in a table I created just to do the mapping from the St. Paul's. Okay. So now it's out and it's bringing in the data. Now you'll notice this is the table that we're using, and all it has is what we're considering two columns, the incorrect spelling and the correct spelling of St. Paul. We're going to leave that alone. We don't need to do anything to that yet, but we have a stream over here of the staging customer that we're going to be working on. So the first thing we need to do is change this city to be proper case. So I just select that guy, I right click, I go under transform column and text transformations, and lo and behold, there is a capitalize each word function. And lo and behold, that's as easy as that to fix that particular problem, which, you know, we're quite thrilled about. So the next thing I need to do is now move into fixing the issue with staging to clean city, to actually do that mapping from the incorrect spellings of St. Paul to the proper one. And we need to do a merge query in order to do that. We need to merge these tables together first. So here it's saying, oh, you want to merge the staging customer, and it's saying, well, which table do you want to merge that with? Well, I only have one other table in here. It's asking what kind of join. It's a left outer join for those who are SQL techie people. All that means is it's going to keep all of the customer information. It's never going to drop one of those pieces, and it's only going to display something from this clean city if there is one to be displayed. Oh, I have to check. The joins are from the city to the city, the staging city. Now it's going out and checking to say, okay, how many matches are there here? And it's finding there are almost 1,600, so less than 10% of the records are for these incorrect spellings of St. Paul. Okay, so now it's added a piece, the staging to clean city, but it isn't showing us those two columns. We have to actually click on this expand button for it to show that. So we don't actually need the original staging city, so I'm just going to bring in the clean city here. And now we have that added. Now, in the case of New York, there isn't going to be anything there because there was nothing to look up. So I need to create another column that sort of combines that information. So I'm going to do an add column, a custom column, and I'm going to call it custom city. And I'm going to do a quick statement here. And I'm going to say, you know, if that clean city that we just created, if that is equal to null, then use the original city. But if it's not, else, meaning if it did go out and find something, we're going to use that clean city that we just found. And that's really as simple as it gets from a custom column perspective. So now it's out there. And I'm not going to scroll down and show you, but it actually now will have something populated. And in the case of St. Paul, it will show up properly. So what I'm going to do now is click on Publish, which is now going to take us out to here. And it's out there publishing that clean customer piece. And it's also actually going to refresh the data as well. Now, because we've had a couple of issues, I'm not going to be able to take you into the scenario for the cleansing and the stored procedure. I will take you over and kind of show you what it is while this is running. This is a very, very simple stored procedure. This is for the sales side. Essentially, what it's doing is in the code down here is it cleans out the previous version of whatever was in that clean sales, because we're doing a full refresh on a daily basis. We just wipe out and reload every day. And then it's going to insert into that table a select statement here. Some people who are familiar with SQL will recognize this. It's just saying from this staging sales table, bring in these columns, but only do it where the type is service and the sale price is less than or equal to 1,000, or in the case of products, the sale price is less than or equal to 5,000. So all that's doing is it's dropping out any service records over $1,000 and any product records over $5,000. And then it's going out and it is essentially writing those things that had dropped out into a separate event table that we can then use to communicate to the business what records were dropped out so that they understand there's something missing and they need to take some action. That's the whole purpose of this stored procedure. And I'm actually going to run it right now, and we may be able to look at it, or we may not, but we want to have time for question and answer here as well. If I go back over to this other Fabric window, it has refreshed the data, and I want to go back over real quickly and just show a couple of things here. So now we have, I wanted to show in our staging data, we have all these records that have St. Paul spelled out like that. Now, if we look down and I run that same thing for the clean data now, what looks like St. Paul? Well, that is not, it must not be finished with what it was doing. So we won't be able to go back to that. But there are a bunch of records that were converted to St. Paul.
Yeah, there is a lag in the warehouse
right.
data in Fabric. So yeah, go back and try that in a couple of minutes, and we'll see.
Yeah, we'll go back in a couple. But in the meanwhile, I know we're running down to 10 minutes. We can go back and take a look at that. But Brian, why don't we open it up for questions and answers at this point?
All right. If anyone has a question on what Chuck covered or on data cleansing, data integration in general, go ahead and type that into the Q&A space within Teams, and we can answer that. Pam is asking, is data profiling available in Fabric, or do you have to do that in Power BI first?
No, it is available in Fabric 100%, as I understand it.
Nice. All right. Other questions?
Keep in mind also that if you have Fabric or any license that allows you to use Power BI within Fabric, Brian, doesn't that always include the ability to use Power BI Desktop or not?
Right.
Yeah, right. So you're always going to have that Power BI Desktop available.
Yep. But you can do that profiling right within the data flow in Fabric.
Yep.
All right. So as you took us through this, Chuck, your data cleansing rules kind of flowed out of your profiling of the data. Are there other ways that those data cleansing rules might get established that you might be informed of data issues?
As I tried to indicate, it's usually done, data cleansing is usually done as a reaction to a problem that's found by someone in the business or sometimes someone in IT. But usually the cleansing rules are generated by an issue that's noticed sort of in real time. Something happens and a particular type of error starts to come up, and you get someone in the business coming to say, hey, what's going on here? So does that make sense? Does that answer the question, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. Other questions or comments? See, is the St. Paul data updated yet?
Well, let's see. It is not
Yet.
That is interesting. Also a possibility that I made an error in the construction of that. So,
Constructing on the fly is always fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to run a refresh of a different one that I just created and see
Okay.
if that makes a difference here.
All right.
Start running this now too.
One lesson to take away as we're looking at this is that the fabric warehouse is not the same as a SQL Server data instance. The fabric warehouse is definitely created as an analytics environment where there's a load that's going to happen uh, with some frequency, but not real time. And then that fabric environment, that warehouse environment is going to show that data as it gets processed. But we don't want to look to a warehouse environment to implement something that needs to be up to the split second
Right.
displaying.
Right.
Fabric does now have in preview a SQL Server data engine, a true SQL Server engine that is available within Fabric for meeting those more real-time processing, transactional processing needs right within a Fabric environment. You don't have to have an Azure SQL or an Azure SQL managed instance. You can do that within Fabric, integrate that very tightly within your analytics environment, but still have that real-time transactional processing available.
So you'll notice that query did come back now. We've got St. Paul spelt correctly there. I did want to quickly show you that that St. Paul itself in the clean data does not exist. It exists spelt properly and cased properly. So the data cleansing actually worked as we intended.
Excellent.
All right. Further questions? Okay, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Let me show you the data that the event table that I created with that data should have some records in it now. Oh, that's the count. That's not the actual values. Yeah, there are 57 records in that event table. And if we look here, we've got products listed at the top, and you'll see that the products, the sale price for them listed here is all over that $5,000 we talked about. And there's a message here at the end that essentially it says the sale price is suspicious for the product. So that data could then be used in a simple Power BI report that's published to the to the Power BI service, or actually sent out as subscriptions to various users in the organization that have need to know that. So.
Yeah, that's a really helpful validation. I worked with one organization that had someone leaned on the zero as they were entering a sales amount and had I think it was a million or $10 million sale when it was supposed to be $1,000.
Yeah.
And what was really irritating is the error was not caught until after the month was closed. So
Yeah.
they had a month that was $1 million or more too high, over-reported, and they couldn't make the correction until the following month. That just drove
Yeah.
the accounting people nuts.
Yeah, and the other the common in my experience at a particular company I was at, the most common reason for that kind of an error is someone would enter a part number into a
Mhm.
quantity field where the part number was all numeric. So all of a sudden, you had someone ordering, 1 million items where, obviously 10 would be the maximum. And the problem with that is you might say to yourself, well, why doesn't the application catch that? And that's a good question. But oftentimes you have to realize that depending on what the application is, there may be instances where you do sell something, thousands and thousands are actually a valid quantity, and sometimes it's not. So
Yeah.
there aren't your application can be programmed, and often I think increasingly it is, to catch data entry errors like this. I mean, we've all been online and have entered something wrong into a column or into a field on a screen, and been saying, hey, that you can't use that. And I think that is getting better over time. But it's not ever going to be completely eliminated. And that's why this is such data cleansing is usually, quite frankly, more ad hoc than a planned activity. When you're getting a new data set in, it really is important to do that profiling, and have that drive the validation rules, particularly if the new data source is external to your company, whether that's a feed on demographics from some market research company, or it's zip code data that you can get off online, or it's weather data, or something, or data from some of your customers that you need to do some analysis on. There are any new data set needs to be profiled, and validation rules need to be created for it. And you want to do that in a planned process as much as possible. But for data cleansing, the most common scenario is an error is found, and you need to fix it. So,
Absolutely.
okay,
All
well, we
right.
are at time.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us today. Hope that this was some helpful information. And we thank you for giving us an hour of your time.